My family excluded me from the family business, so I started my own. I grew up believing that someday I would take over the construction company my grandfather started 40 years ago. Every summer vacation, I spent time at the office, learning about blueprints, contracts, and watching my dad manage crews. The smell of fresh lumber and concrete dust felt like home to me. I remember being 12 years old, wearing an oversized hard hat, following the foreman around job sites while my dad discussed project timelines with clients. Those moments felt magical, like I was part of something bigger than myself. My grandfather would tell me stories about the early days, when he built his first house with just a hammer and determination. I absorbed every detail, from the way he calculated material costs to his method of reading people during negotiations. The walls of his office were covered with photos of completed projects, and I dreamed of adding my own achievements to that collection someday. When I graduated college with a degree in civil engineering, I expected to walk straight into the family business. Instead, my dad sat me down at our kitchen table one evening and delivered news that shattered my world. My younger brother, who had just finished his business degree, would be joining the company as operations manager. My cousin, fresh out of trade school, got the assistant project manager position. But there was no place for me. The reasoning was simple, according to my father. They needed people who could start from the bottom and work their way up, not someone who might expect special treatment because of family connections. He spoke with the same cold professionalism he used with difficult clients, avoiding eye contact while he explained that the company needed to maintain its reputation for hiring based on merit, not family ties. The irony of his words was not lost on me, considering that my brother and cousin were both family members who had just been hired. The rejection hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. I had spent my entire life preparing for this moment, studying construction management, interning at other companies to gain experience, even learning Spanish to better communicate with our crews. I felt like everything I had worked for was meaningless. My mom tried to console me, saying that maybe in a few years there would be an opening, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes too. She had always talked about how proud she was that all her boys would work together someday. That night, I sat in my childhood room, staring at the collection of construction books and industry magazines I had accumulated over the years. The dreams and plans I had carefully crafted felt like childish fantasies now. I questioned everything about myself, wondering if I had misread the signals all those years, if my family had just been humoring me while secretly planning to exclude me from their legacy. For 3 months, I wallowed in self-pity, living in my childhood bedroom and sending out resumes to construction companies across the state. The responses were either rejections or offers for entry-level positions that paid half of what I expected after 5 years of college. Every morning, I watched my brother and cousin leave for work at what I still considered my company, and every evening, I listened to them discuss projects over dinner while I sat there unemployed and bitter. They would talk about client meetings, project deadlines, and office politics as if I wasn't there. My brother seemed to relish his new role, often mentioning how much responsibility he had been given and how quickly he was learning the business. My cousin, meanwhile, shared stories about the respect he was gaining from the construction crews, the same crews I had worked alongside during my summer breaks. The casual way they discussed their work lives felt like salt in an open wound. The turning point came when I discovered that my brother had been spreading stories about me at the office. A family friend who worked for a competing company mentioned casually that he had heard I was difficult to work with and had unrealistic expectations about my role in the business. The betrayal cut deeper than the original rejection. Not only had my family excluded me, but they were actively damaging my reputation in the industry. I realized that waiting for their approval or for circumstances to change was pointless. I needed to take control of my own destiny. That evening, I confronted my brother about the rumors. He denied everything at first, but when I pressed him with specific details, he finally admitted that he had mentioned my disappointment to a few people, claiming he was just explaining why I wasn't working at the company. His defensive attitude and lack of remorse made it clear that this was not an accident or misunderstanding. He was deliberately undermining me, perhaps to eliminate any future competition for his position. I started researching what it would take to start my own construction company. The initial requirements seemed overwhelming: business licenses, insurance, bonding, equipment, and most importantly, capital. I had some savings from my college job and a small inheritance from my grandmother, but it was nowhere near enough to compete with established companies. I spent weeks reading about business formation, studying successful entrepreneurs, and analyzing the local construction market. The more I learned, the more determined I became to prove that I could succeed without my family's help. I created detailed spreadsheets tracking startup costs, potential revenue streams, and market opportunities. I researched every competitor in the area, studying their strengths and weaknesses, looking for gaps I could exploit. The process was both exhausting and exhilarating, giving me a sense of purpose I had not felt since graduation. My first breakthrough came through an unlikely source. While scrolling through social media one evening, I noticed a post from a former college classmate who had moved to a rapidly growing suburb about an hour away. She was complaining about how difficult it was to find reliable contractors for small residential projects. Her comment section was full of similar complaints from other residents. I started researching the area and discovered that while several large construction companies serve the region, there was a gap in the market for smaller, more personalized residential work. The population had grown significantly in recent years, with many young professionals moving to the area for its proximity to the city combined with suburban amenities. These new residents had money to spend on home improvements, but were frustrated by the lack of responsive, quality contractors. I decided to focus on home renovations and small additions rather than competing directly with my family's commercial construction business. This strategy would allow me to start with less capital while building a reputation and client base. I used my savings to purchase basic tools, rent a small storage unit, and register my business. The first few months were terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I worked 18-hour days, handling everything from initial client consultations to actual construction work to bookkeeping. I learned to write professional proposals, negotiate contracts, and manage project timelines. Every evening, I would return to my storage unit office, updating spreadsheets and preparing for the next day's work. The isolation was difficult, but the sense of ownership over my success was intoxicating. My first major client was a retired teacher who wanted to convert her garage into a home office. She had been quoted outrageous prices by larger companies and was willing to give a newcomer a chance. I spent 2 weeks on the project, working meticulously to ensure every detail was perfect. When she posted photos of the finished space on social media, praising my attention to detail and reasonable pricing, I received 3 more inquiries within days. Word-of-mouth referrals became the foundation of my early success. I realized that my smaller size was actually an advantage in the residential market. I could provide personalized service, accommodate special requests, and maintain direct communication with clients throughout the project. Larger companies often assign different personnel to various stages of a project, creating confusion and frustration for homeowners. However, success brought unexpected challenges. 6 months into my business, I discovered that my father had been calling potential clients, warning them about my inexperience and suggesting they would be better served by established companies. A client who had initially hired me for a kitchen renovation canceled the contract after receiving such a call. When I confronted my father about this, he claimed he was protecting the family name and that my failures would reflect poorly on their company. The conversation ended with him telling me that I was making a mistake and should consider finding work in a different industry entirely. His interference felt like a personal attack, not just professional sabotage. I realized that he saw my success as a threat to his authority and his company's reputation. The fact that I was succeeding without his help challenged his narrative about my incompetence and lack of readiness for the construction business. Instead of discouraging me, this interference only strengthened my resolve. I realized that I could not succeed by trying to avoid conflict with my family. I needed to compete directly and prove that I could not only survive but thrive in the same market. I started bidding on larger projects, including small commercial jobs that put me in direct competition with my family's company. I invested in better equipment, hired 2 part-time employees, and developed a more sophisticated marketing strategy. I created a professional website, developed relationships with local suppliers, and began networking with other business owners in the area. My employees were younger guys who shared my enthusiasm for doing quality work and building something from the ground up. We developed a culture of excellence and customer service that set us apart from larger, more impersonal companies. My breakthrough came when I landed a contract to renovate a popular local restaurant. The owner had initially planned to hire my family's company, but was impressed by my detailed proposal and willingness to work around their operating schedule. The project was challenging, requiring me to coordinate with multiple subcontractors while ensuring the restaurant could remain open during most of the renovation. I worked nights and weekends for 2 months, but the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The restaurant's reopening was featured in the local newspaper, with my company prominently credited for the transformation. The project taught me valuable lessons about project management, client relations, and the importance of maintaining quality standards even under pressure. The restaurant owner became one of my strongest advocates, referring several other commercial clients to my company. The success of the restaurant project led to more commercial opportunities. Within a year, I was competing for contracts that my family's company had considered secure. I found that my smaller size was actually an advantage in many situations. I could make decisions quickly, adapt to changing client needs, and provide personalized service that larger companies struggled to match. My profit margins were higher because I had lower overhead costs, and I could offer competitive pricing while still maintaining quality. I began to understand that the construction industry was changing, with many clients preferring smaller, more agile companies that could provide better communication and faster response times. My company was positioned perfectly to take advantage of these trends, while traditional companies like my family's business were struggling to adapt. The most satisfying moment came when I outbid my family's company for a major renovation project at a historic building downtown. The client specifically mentioned that they were impressed by my innovative approach and attention to detail. When my brother confronted me about this, accusing me of using inside knowledge to undercut their bid, I realized that they finally saw me as a legitimate competitor rather than a family disappointment. The dynamic had shifted completely. I had gone from being the excluded family member to being a serious threat to their business. The conversation with my brother was tense and emotional, with years of resentment and competition coming to the surface. He accused me of being vindictive and trying to destroy the family business, while I pointed out that I was simply competing fairly in an open market. My success began attracting attention from other family members who had previously supported my exclusion from the business. My uncle, who had been one of my father's strongest supporters, started sending me potential clients. My cousin, who had taken the position I wanted, began asking for my advice on difficult projects. Even my mother, who had tried to stay neutral in the family conflict, started openly praising my achievements to friends and neighbors. The shift in family dynamics was gradual but noticeable. At family gatherings, conversations about work became awkward, with people unsure whether to discuss the family business in front of me or ask about my competing company. Some relatives seemed genuinely proud of my entrepreneurial success, while others remained loyal to my father and viewed my actions as a betrayal. The final validation came when a major developer approached me about a multi-million-dollar project. They had initially considered my family's company, but were impressed by my track record and wanted to work with someone who could provide more personalized attention. The contract would be the largest my company had ever handled, requiring me to expand significantly and take on substantial financial risk. But it also represented the opportunity to establish myself as a major player in the local construction industry. The project involved constructing a mixed-use development with retail space, offices, and residential units. It would require me to hire additional employees, purchase expensive equipment, and manage multiple subcontractors simultaneously. The financial implications were staggering, but the potential rewards were even greater. As I prepared to sign the contract, I received an unexpected phone call from my father. For the first time in 2 years, he wanted to meet and discuss the possibility of our companies collaborating on future projects. He had finally realized that my success was not just luck or a temporary fluke, but the result of genuine skill and determination. The conversation was awkward and filled with unspoken emotions, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. He acknowledged that he had underestimated my abilities and admitted that some of his actions had been motivated by fear that I would fail and embarrass the family. We discussed the possibility of joint ventures, shared resources, and even the potential for future cooperation between our companies. Looking back, I realized that being excluded from the family business was actually the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to develop independence, creativity, and resilience that I never would have gained working within an established company. My business has grown beyond anything I could have imagined when I started, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that I built it entirely through my own efforts. The rejection that once felt like the end of my world became the beginning of something far more rewarding and meaningful. I learned that success is not about inheriting opportunities, but about creating them through determination, hard work, and the willingness to take risks. My relationship with my family has improved, but it is now based on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. I am no longer the disappointed son seeking approval, but a successful entrepreneur who has proven his worth through actions rather than words.